me your name real quick?
I'm Clovis Putney.
And how did you get your name?
My ma gave it to me when I was born.
Yeah.
I was born in the home my dad built, your grandfather. He built the home, 1201 Northwest 32nd Street. And it had a lot of interesting characteristics of the home. My father was a self-employed mechanic, and his business was quite good, and it was all cash, no bank accounts. And he kept his money on his person, as well as in a box that I was in charge of. And in the home that he built, there was in the linen closet, in the hallway of this house, between the joists, cabinet doors that opened and closed, there was a space, and as a young child, I couldn't reach it. And there were drawers that I would pull out and step on like steps, stairways. And I got up tall enough then to reach inside of this linen closet behind boards that were part of the construction, and put a box that was cardboard, and he would say, "Clovis, go get the box," and I would run over to the drawer, pull out the drawers, climb up, get the box, and bring it back to the kitchen table, and he would disperse the dollars or put money in the box for later.
Do you recall how much money was in the box?
No, but there was enough to carry us through the week and so on.
Why did he do that and not believe in banks?
Because banks were not, at that time, during the Depression, were to be trusted. But he knew he could trust himself. But see, banks were not in good favor at that time. This is during the Depression. Now, the house had all the typical attributes. The ironing board, you know how ironing boards that are built in to the wall or construction, they pull out. Well, usually they're on a hinge, and they have a slanting shelf type thing that supports the board. I was small enough that I could crawl into this board and lay down. And Mother was up standing on the floor using the board that was above me to iron. And she would ask me my spelling words, and I would spell them while I was upside down on the board. And that's how we studied. And let's see, what else?
So your dad built the house, and he was what by trade? He was sort of a...
Well, he was a mechanic.
Yep.
By trade and a craftsman. He built several houses throughout his life, including the house on 23rd and Ellison. But on 32nd Street in Oklahoma City, we were on the corner of Military and 32nd. We had the corner house. It was large. And in the back of the house, the lot in the back, he built a croquet court that was a borderline, was all oil well drill pipe. So there was no grass on the court. It was a great court, and we would have badminton and croquet, of course, and it was a fast court. And it was recreation for quite a number of kids in the neighborhood.
That's great.
Yeah, it was. And I lighted it with lights so we could play in the summertime because it would get quite hot.
So you were like the first lighted croquet court in the country.
Oh, well, I don't know about that.
That was before lighted baseball fields, though.
I suppose. But anyway, it was a hit of our neighborhood.
Sure.
And badminton was a great team sport of that time, too. So the court was great for recreation.
So I'll go back and forth. Tell me a little bit about your dad and how he came to Oklahoma and settled there. Do you recall much of that?
Well, I don't know much about that. He was born in Oklahoma,
Oh,
but the city, he and my mother, let's see, how did that happen? I can't remember my mother's hometown, but they met and he courted her in the area of which I don't recall.
doesn't matter.
And then as life went on, he had several brothers, Harold and Simmy, let's see, and then he had a sister, I don't know all their names now, but anyway, he came to the city and started a business, a garage for car maintenance. Brakes were the big item, and it was a time when cars did not have heaters built in, and he would install heaters that were available to cars. And of course, Oklahoma would get cold and hot, but cold. And so car heaters were a big business, and brakes.
So then he met your mom, and when did they get married?
Well, I don't know the year, but I was born in 1924, so it was before that. My sister was the eldest, so she was born before the 24.
So Aunt Jerry,
Yeah.
she married a mechanic as well. Talk about that a little bit.
Not much to say. Bick was his name, and he worked with my father for a while and later purchased the business. He bought the business and ran it for a while. But that's the end of that.
Yeah. And he had a gas station, I remember. Was that?
That was associated with the garage.
Okay. What is the big swing? Tell me about that.
At the croquet court, oil well drill pipes, as I told you, outlined the court. Well, at one point, kind of a head point of the court, he got some big pipe, planted them in the ground, and erected it to make an archway for a swing. And it was a very popular item on the court. So you could sit there in the summer months and swing way out. And the strong pipe that held the swing up were sturdy and very substantial and was safe. So we kids could swing way out. At least we thought it was
Sure.
way out.
And your dad built that?
Yes. He built all of this stuff around the house.
So how did he hurt his leg? What was going on there?
Well, he was working on a car, doing one of his, I think it was when he was installing a hot water heater in the car, which is, inside, under the hood. And he asked the owner of the car to start the motor of the car. And the guy had it in gear. It was at the time when you didn't have the type of transmission that modern day cars have. And he was in the garage and so the car bumper hit his leg, forced him back into the bench of the car, and the stupid man kept pushing on the starter and throwing the car in gear forward and pinned him against the bench and broke his leg. And that was considerable damage. For quite a while he was laid up. I know he repaired himself at home, mostly at our home. He was not in the hospital.
He never went to the hospital?
Oh, yes, to get it set.
Yep.
And to get a cast on it. And then he came home and waited for it to get strong enough to stand again. But he had that accident, and then he had another accident in which he lost his eye.
Oh, I forgot about that.
And so he had, I think it was his left eye that was damaged to the point that it had to be removed. And he had a glass eye. And he joked about it always. I have my eye on you type statements. He and my mother loved to play cards and card games, and they were very good at it. She had little social gatherings at the house a lot, and his eye, but it never stopped him from driving. When you lose an eye, you lose dimension. So he had to, when he would pour coffee, he had to watch the spout because he would miss the cup. And anything. But he got accustomed to that dimensional problem.
So the card game?
The card games were just bridge and I think pinochle. And I don't know what the games of the day were, but those two I recall. And they loved to play them. And they had groups of people that loved to play the games as well. And they would rotate among the people that liked the game to make social occasions out of. And Mom was the leader of the pack, and she would like to have them over. And I recall helping her. I enjoy preparing food for our dinners, and I'm sure that's where it came from. Mother would like me to help her prepare refreshments for these card occasions, and so that was part of my responsibility, and I still like to do that.
Yeah, you're a good cook.
I'm sure Mom was responsible.
Yeah. So, so tell me a little bit about your mom and what she did. She raised two.
What she did in raising us?
Yeah. Well, what was she doing before she met your dad? Do you recall that?
She didn't work in any institution. She's just a housewife and just kept the house going. I don't know what you mean by doing what she did. Other,
Well, she went to school, maybe, or.
yeah, she did, just a high school education.
Yeah. And then met your dad,
Yeah.
and then had Jerry. Any kid raising stories your mom might have done?
Well, Jerry had 2 kids.
Well, but I mean, your mom had 2 kids too.
Mm-hmm.
So, were there any funny kid raising stories you can recall from your mom?
And raising myself and
Yeah, and Jerry.
no, let's see, nothing spectacular. My mother had a sister named Laureen, and she lived in El Reno, which is a small town west of Oklahoma City. I could not, as a small child, say Aunt Laureen with any clarity. So I called her Reno because she lived in the town of Reno, El Reno. So that's that. And she had a daughter, Laureen had a daughter named Carleen. Carl was the father, Laureen's husband, in other words. So Carl and her name, Laureen, made it Carleen. And we were good friends, Carleen and I. And I would take the transportation to El Reno was by either car, which I didn't drive, or interurban, which was electric, like a streetcar, electric, but bigger, and could go faster. And so they had a rail track between Oklahoma City and El Reno, and I could get on it just about 2 blocks from 1201 Northwest 32nd Street and go to El Reno and have a weekend or and that was fine. I could do that all by myself. So that was a fun time, and I would do that often during the summer months. And they had a great swimming pool in El Reno that Carleen and I would go to. And then the theater or motion picture theater that we would attend. So that was mainly the recreation.
Then how old were you then?
Oh, I was probably 8, 9, 10, 11.
Wow. And you would travel, how many minutes would that train take?
Oh, about biggest part of an hour.
Wow. What about the spinach and toast?
Well, during the Depression period, we never were hungry, but she was inventive. Much like Sue, our wife, she would have spinach, canned spinach, which I like today. I like that. And she would have spinach on toast, a good, nice hunk of good bread and hard-boiled egg, and that would be our meal, spinach on toast.
That's pretty tasty, actually. I do something similar, but I do it on croutons.
Well, that's good.
It's the same thing.
Yeah. So,
A little bit of oil and spinach and croutons.
so that was a meal that Mother prepared, and we lived frugally but very happily.
So, about the Depression, did your dad's business?
Well, of course, there was a lump in the volume of business, but he was inventive, as Mother was in the kitchen. He was inventive. He would build trailers open-faced trailers, open, not closed. They were like, what do you call them, pickups? And and they were quite good. They would not fishtail because he had balanced them or whatever you do to keep him from fishtail. And he would get a chassis, and if there was not a lot of business, he would build these at the shop, and they would always sell. And that's how he kept things going. Another thing that because it was a garage that had no doors that closed, except when he was closing for the day or something. So it was open to the street. Well, cars, when he would change oil, crankshaft oil in the motor oil, he would save the oil, and he had a method of, which I thought was clever. On top of the roof of the garage was a tank, and he had a compressor, and by compressed air, he would force this oil that he had gathered into the tank on top of the garage. Now down below in the garage was another barrel, cast iron barrel, that he would burn the oil, and that would keep the area of the garage warm enough, and people could back themselves up to it and keep warm. So he was burning oil that didn't cost him anything.
So he had a oil heater for the shop that he would then collect from the used oil from cars that were his customers.
Correct.
And basically recycle.
Well, yeah. So he had no natural gas.
No?
This was all oil. And he would light it with a acetylene torch because he had a welding apparatus. And I got to do that once or twice in my life.
Yeah, he was clever, for sure. So what's the quick story about Orange Julius?
Well, during part of this early life of my father, whose name was Orange, and he had a business opportunity to go into business with a man named Bill Hamlin. So it was Dad's money that started the Orange Julius. And drink, it's kind of like a smoothie, and compared to today's thing. So it's just orange juice and a simple syrup, which is sugar water, and some kind of compound, which I could look up on the computer and find out what it was, because I've done that. The recipe for Orange Julius. The powder. And that was quite a good business. And he would have fresh oranges, and he would squeeze them and make the orange juice out of the orange juice machine. And it was quite popular and quite successful. And it was in the store, merchandise store in Oklahoma City called John A. Brown, I think it was. And they had a little corner of that store which had a lot of volume, and which he had his little store of Orange Julius. And that's about all of that.
So, what did your dad do to start that business?
Just be there and have some money.
No, he did something with his partner. Did he invest in the business?
Yes.
So what do you mean by that? He invested in the business.
Well, money, just money. And that started, but it was his labor that that did it. His labor and interest that kept it going for many years. And then John A. Brown, the store, maybe they changed, I don't know what, but maybe they changed ownership or something, and the Orange Julius portion just kind of went away, not needed, and there was no other place for that Orange Julius to go that would be satisfactory. And then Father went into a restaurant business called Little Egypt, and that was fair to poor experience in our life. But that lasted maybe 6-8 months, and that was the end of that kind of enterprise for him. And then came the garage business.
Okay. Which he retired on.
Yeah, and then he died after garage business, he built the house on Ellison, and he built a home and a business for his brother Harold, who had a bicycle business on 23rd Street. 23rd Street in Oklahoma City was a main thoroughfare running east and west in the city. And so Harold had that. And Simmy, who was kind of self-made man, built a home on West 10th Street, which at that time was pretty far out of the city. And of course, now it isn't. And on an acreage that had fruit trees and nut trees. And he and his wife, Maud was her name, were self-employed people and no kids, never had kids, and they were quite well off. And so they built this, we thought, at that time, a large 2-story home. And we visited there, like on weekends, once a month or so. And that was it.
I remember the brick house, visiting your mom, the brick house on a dirt alley in the street, and then it looked like a 2-story building.
Our home?
Yep.
On 32nd was not brick.
Oh.
It was a wooden house.
Shoot, I'm trying to remember. What was when we would come visit, what house was your mom staying in?
Ellison.
Okay.
And that had some brick frontage,
Okay.
but not a total brick.
Okay. And then he would put a P on the door. There's a screen door. You put a big P on it for Putney.
I don't recall that.
Okay. That's what I recall. So early. Oh, the soda jerk. Well, now I guess we're going on to you. So early work experiences being a soda jerk.
I was that was one of my early experiences. I always worked at something because I wanted my own money for Christmas, birthday gifts, and so on. And so one of the jobs I could do was work for Fairmont Ice Creams Company. So they had a retail store. I got a cough. And I was a soda jerk, making real good sodas. I love sodas to this day. And that was that. Nothing more to say about that. Just dispensing ice cream and ice cream sundaes and sodas and anything related to ice cream.
Which you still like.
Which I still like. And then what I did after that, I was a projectionist in a theater, motion picture theater, several theaters. Running the projection. And I enjoyed that very much.
What kind of movies did you spend? Right up?
Well, the owner of the theater, of course, shows the film, rented the film, and it was whatever was going on at that time, and I would run them. And I was very proficient and on time, and I got started with the projectionist in my junior high school. The junior high school I went to is Harding Junior High, not too far. I could walk to and from Harding from 1201 Northwest 32nd Street. But at that school, they had 35 millimeter projection equipment.
At the school?
At this junior high school.
Wow.
And that was quite unusual. They would have film for the public to come in on Friday nights, and I was the projectionist. I recall that we would run serials. Serial is the reel would end on some dramatic point at that time, and you had to come back the next week to see how the heroine survived the event. And so that attracted a lot of people. But from that experience that I had in junior high school, I was able to go to work in real theaters. And that was about 5 or 6 different theaters in Oklahoma City and surrounding areas. And by this time, I was getting old enough to drive. My father the mechanic, had access to finding fairly good automobiles that he could get without much money. And I had a Chrysler 2-door rumble seat car, which was really fun. And this car was, Dad had fixed it up and made it look good. And it was the first car of the Chrysler group that had hydraulic brakes. And a rumble seat was just an add-on. And between the cab of the car and the rumble seat was a window that you could raise and lower, so we could communicate with whoever was in the rumble seat. So that was fun, and I would drive to these theaters that were several miles away and do the projectionist routine and make a few bucks, and that sustained my need for quite a few years.
So then you graduate from high school.
And
you work all through high school?
yeah, and college. And then I went to OCU for a while. I worked, worked in the post office. And I worked, this was in my senior year at high school. I worked the graveyard shift in the post office to make more money. And graveyard was like midnight to early morning, say 6:30 or 7 in the morning. Then I would go home and have breakfast and go to school. Then after that, I would sleep during the day after school. But working in the post office gave me a little more money, and it was not much work. I worked the military mail, and this is where you had the military. Oh, I've forgotten what was the military at that point. Probably Army or something. And I would work that box, as they called it. He had a box that had cubby holes in it, built in it, and he would toss the mail into the appropriate cubby hole so that the carrier could pick it up and deliver it. So you learned your box, as you called it, which was not difficult. I was quite fast at tossing the letters and packages.
So you did that starting in high school. When did you study? If you slept during the evening after school?
I slept during the day.
Yeah, during the day. When did you study?
Oh, probably in that period of daylight and sleep.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Did you have any fun in high school?
Fun. I enjoyed I was able to sing. I like to sing,
Okay.
which I don't do anymore. So the choruses and the choir events of the school curriculum were entertainment and fun for me. Simple things.
Yeah.
I didn't play any sports. Enjoyed watching, mostly indoor, like basketball. I like the speed of the basketball.
Okay. In the Midwest, there was good basketball.
Yeah. And OCU, which was a school, had excellent basketball. I was the editor of the yearbook in OCU, so I became acquainted as the editor with a lot of the happenings of the school campus and the people that were in them. That's about it.
So, from OCU, that's Oklahoma City University, you went to the Navy.
Correct. The Navy. I was drafted into the Navy. Not a bad experience. The war was diminishing at that time. This is World War II. And so I went in the Navy to San Diego and through their camp, their boot camp there, which was mostly uneventful. Just you had to experience the regulations of the Navy, and that was not hard to do and adjust to. And if you wanted to make trouble, you didn't. But I didn't want to make trouble, so I just went along and became a good sailor. And that lasted about 3 years.
Now, didn't you work for Industrial Business Machines in the Navy?
IBM, yes. My job within the Navy was learn to operate and the functions of the punch card, IBM cards that had punch holes in them. And the holes meant certain information, and that's how. And I learned how to. IBM had several types of machine for different purposes, and I had to go to school for that, which I enjoyed, and because it was kind of mechanical, and I learned to wire the boards that made the machines run for the information that was ordered and desired, which I liked doing. And that lasted throughout the Navy period. And I was rated, I had a stripe for my industrious life there. And IBM became a major accounting feature of the military. After that, if I had stayed with the IBM idea, I don't know where I would have been. But I didn't.
That's okay. You know, it was the beginning of the IBM Corporation.
Yeah, and the use of this type of machines, they were big machines, sorting, vast amounts of information of that period rather quickly. But this is all done with cards that were rectangular and of a certain density card, like cardboard, but it wasn't that thick. But they were able to withstand the rigorous amount of movement that the cards had to go through.
Sure. And that was programming the computer to sort through the data.
Yeah, and you had machines that printed, machines that sorted, and depending upon what was ordered by the boss guys, you had drawers and drawers of these cards, so you had them sorted and filed according to a general information. But then you would pull these cards from the file and sort them into whatever the requirement was and ordered. And then you print that information so that whoever ordered this could see the data. You could do it by, if rank or sex or whatever. It's just a myriad of things.
Sure. Huh. So then, from the Navy, you were discharged.
And then I went to school
And that was where?
at OCU.
No, I thought you went to Chicago.
Well, I did.
So you finished OCU
Um,
after the Navy?
Yeah,
Okay.
and then I went to George Williams. George Williams is in Chicago, and it was the YMCA. I had made my decision to become a YMCA director, and so I wanted to go to the Y school, and I did, and I graduated from that, and then went to California.
Okay. So
I've been here ever since.
yeah. So you got a master's in
Group work education.
okay, and that was in Chicago.
Hmm.
What school was that? George Williams.
The name of the school was George Williams, and it was named by whoever, I don't know who named the school, but George William was a real person who was like a founder of the Y in England. So they named the school after him.
And you went there on a GI Bill.
Yeah, the tail end of the GI Bill. I went to school for 6 years in college.